Today I'm going to talk to you guys about different canning lids and tightening the rings and all this stuff. But first we're going to talk about the TLDR version of how canning works. So what we do is we put our food into our clean jars, and then what we do is we put them in either a water bath canner or a steam canner for high acid foods or a pressure canner for low acid foods. We leave the appropriate amount of headspace, and what happens is we put those jars into the canner and it heats up the jar and the food, and what happens is the food expands within the jar, pushing that extra oxygen out that we left for headspace, and then upon cooling, after the processing time is done, it takes this lid and pulls it down, creating that hermetic vacuum seal. That's the TLDR version, and it is absolutely magical that you can do this and your food's gonna keep on the shelf for so long. It's not just a year, it's not 2 years, it can be nearly indefinitely, as long as your lid and seal are intact. Now, a big nuanced thing with using lids is headspace. So generally speaking, when you're water bath canning, for most of your high acid foods that have a longer processing time than 10 minutes, you're gonna leave a 1/2 inch headspace, which is normally this second little ring on your jar. And for jams and jellies, I have a short, and pickles, if you're processing them for a short amount of time, meaning 10 minutes or less, or you're open kettle canning, you can leave a 1/4 inch of headspace, because really we're not processing it to completely heat the food through, we're just processing it to heat it up and cause the seal. Now for pressure canning, you can pressure can high acid food for a shorter amount of time as opposed to water bath at a lower weight than you would low acid food. But straight across the board for pressure canning, your headspace should be 1 inch, which is this first little ring at the bottom. That's a common thing that people, I think, do wrong, is when they are pressure canning, say like tomato juice or tomato sauce, they only do 1/2 inch headspace, and what happens is at that extreme heat within your pressure canner, that stuff is swelling because it's at 240 to 250 degrees, not 200 to 212 for boiling water, and it's gonna swell a lot. So you always want to leave extra headspace with pressure canning. So now we're going to get into the lids and talk about it. A common question I get a lot on my reels, I get emails, I get comments, is what brand of lid do you recommend? And I've said it before and I'll say it again, I recommend the brand of lid that you can get your hands on, the one that you can afford and the one that works for you. There are so many different brands of lids, and a lot of people have their preferred brand, but what it really comes down to is using that brand correctly. So I'm gonna split the lids into 3 different kinds and we'll go through it. You've got your heavy single-use lids that I also reuse, but they're technically single-use. Then you've got your lighter single-use lids. So this would be like the Green Farm US, Denali. These are the gold Amish lids that I call them. They're just kind of like a generic lid that I can get at the Amish store. And ball lids. People hate ball lids, and I will admit that the quality of these lids has really gone downhill from even when I was a kid. Your heavy lids are going to be 4 jars, superb. And then you have your plastic reusable lids. You have Tattler and Harvest Guard. They're kind of the same design. This is just the older design. This is a newer design because the family couldn't get along, and then Boro bought out Harvest Guard, whatever brand you like, you do your thing. So now we're going to talk about the difference in how you treat these lids. The main reason I'm doing this video is it was spurred by reading the comment sections of a certain lid brand that has been sharing what they call fingertip tight. And we'll talk about that first and foremost. What does fingertip tight mean? Because when you open your ball book or whatever canning book you read, it normally says tighten your rings to fingertip tight. And most people are like, what does that mean? It's this simple. You're gonna take your jar, you're gonna add your lid. Fingertip tight means you take your band, you're going to tighten it until the jar spins, and then you're going to tighten it another 1/4 turn, or just with your fingertips. So you don't want to engage your wrist to turn it, you are turning it only with your finger movement motion. That is fingertip tight. You should never be cranking down on them. You don't want to leave them too loose. That's what fingertip tight is, and I don't know why anybody doesn't explain that better. But that is fingertip tight, nothing else. Now for the heavyweight lids. What I have is superb, the ones with the blue seals, and I've got 4 jars. These are what I both consider heavier lids. So during the canning process, they don't flex as much as what would be the lighter lids. So what you're going to need to do is a different tightening than you would a ball lid. So recently on social media, Superb has been sharing that fingertip tight is simply putting their lid on the jar and taking the band and tightening it until the jar spins, which is how you should treat heavyweight lids. The problem I'm seeing is people are taking that as fingertip tight for all types of lids. So what's happening is it works for your heavyweight lids because these lids need a little bit of extra room to flex. If you tighten these lids down too much, what can happen is the lid can buckle and bend. So you'll see little like creases in here where the lid has buckled because it's been pushing against the band that can't get off, or the lid can completely blow off and send the contents of your food all over your canner, and it's a huge mess. So for Superb and 4 jars, you tighten the band with one hand, put one behind your back so you're not tempted to hold the jar, and tighten it until the jar spins. That's it. That is not fingertip tight though. That is just tightening it till the jar spins. I don't know the correct terminology, but it is not fingertip tight. You cannot do this with a lightweight lid and expect that lid to seal. And here's why. So your lighter weight lids, you've got Ball, Denali, Green Farm, there's other ones, random generic ones you're gonna find on Amazon or wherever. You've got these, they've got quite a bit more flex to them. So what happens is during the canning process, these lids are lighter and they can move a lot more easily. So what you want to do is if you only do this and tighten it to the jar spins, your lid is going to be flapping around in there like it's insane, and it's never going to make good contact with the rim of the jar to seal. You might have some successful seals, but you're going to notice that you're gonna have some issues with sealing. And I've seen it in the comments on the Superb videos that they tightened ball lids and whatever to fingertip tight, as they said, which is to the jar spinning, and none of their jars sealed. That's why we need to differentiate between the heavy brand lids and the ball lids and the other lightweight lids. So these ones are gonna be, if you need to gauge it till the jar spins, and then like a clock, you're gonna do 1/4 more turns. So you're gonna take it from 12 o'clock to 3-ish o'clock. Or you can do what's fingertip tight, which I showed you before, which is taking your fingers, holding the jar in one hand, and only using your fingers to tighten it. Do not engage your wrist, only your fingertips. That's what it means by fingertip tight. I don't know why the books don't just say that. We gotta be confusing, right? And then last, you've got your plastic reusable lids. These guys have absolutely no flex to them. They are rigid. Now these, if you're reusing them, you wanna make sure that the top is concave. If you tighten these inappropriately, sometimes the top can bubble out, and that means the lid is no longer usable. So you wanna make sure the top is concave. With these lids, you put the rubber, you usually heat it up unless you're a rebel like me, and then you kind of center that and you center the lid on top. And then with the Tattler, you treat them, and the Harvest Guard, you treat them like the heavyweight until the jar spins, is what the owner explains. I have found that I have a better seal rate if I just scooch it, just not very much. So till the jar spins, and then I give it a little scooch, that's it. I had trouble with some of the lids blowing off because I don't know if my rings are old or if it's because I have older jars, but that was not tight enough. So you tighten just a scooch, not a 1/4 turn, a scooch. I don't know how else to say that. And then after the canning process, what you do is you wanna, with only these plastic reusable lids, you take them out of the canner and then you're going to crank them down as tight as you can get them. These are the only lids you do that with. The rest of them, the heavyweight single use and the lightweight single use, you take them out of the canner and let them cool and you don't look at them. You do not want to manipulate the band because what that can do is move your lid and break the seal. If you're having issues with your lids sealing still, there are other things that you need to take into account. The first one would be headspace that we talked about. you need to make sure you're leaving enough headspace. Too much headspace is way better than not enough. Because what can happen is if you don't have enough headspace, your food is going to push out and siphon out of the jar, which means the food is pushed out of the jar and it gets all over the rim and into the water of your canner. Most of the time your lids will still seal, but if it's something greasy or big and chunky, it can get between that lid and cause your seal to fail. Not good. Secondly, you really want to clean the jar rims well. So after you get the product in the jar and before you put the lid on, you're going to want to take a clean cloth and just wipe that rim off. And what a lot of people do is they do a pinch and turn. So you get a clean, damp cloth and you pinch the inside and the outside and you turn and you do two full turns until you get a feel for cleaning your rims. I just normally do 2 good wipes and call it good. If it's something fatty like chicken broth or meat, I'll usually do a little bit better. If you go to my website and you read any of my recipes for canning, you will see at the bottom when I'm giving you canning instructions that I say to tighten the rings according to the lid manufacturer's instructions. And this is why, because all lid manufacturers are not the same and there's no one way straight across the board for every single brand on how to tighten the lids. I hope this video is helpful and informative for you guys and helps you have better sealing success with your canning. I'll see you next time.